Hair dye, hand sewing, damaged lambskin.
What more could a girl ask for? My name is Maya, this is Marble, and in this video, I'm going to be once again reaching into my stash of furs and pelts to tackle hand sewing an entire coat. Let's get started.
If you didn't see my last sewing video, I was brushing up on my rusty fur skills by making my brother a Nushanka hat.
And that emboldened me to finally tackle a project that I've been thinking about for about a year now. At this point, I had already collected a bunch of pelts, but I didn't have enough matching lambskin for a coat made out of entirely one color or one texture of lambskin. So I kept putting it off until I came across this lambskin at the thrift store. The dark curly hair gave me a stroke of genius. I've been obsessed with Palomino horses for ages, and something about this curly lambskin gave me the idea of doing an organic patchwork jacket that evokes a Palomino horse's coat. But before I could even think about a design, I had to do some serious damage control. This pelt was $4. Yeah, you heard me right. 4 Canadian dollars. Well, there was a good reason for this discounted price. The suede side was quite dry and damaged with some holes, but that was the least of it. If you look closely, do you see it? That green tinge? It's even worse in real life. My theory is that someone was trying to either clean it or clean around it and use some sort of spray that had a bit of Clorox bleach, something like that in it, and that, of course, gave our lovely lambskin an interesting dye job. Since it was ruined, they discarded it. But let me tell you, it was not ruined. I did some research and saw that while you can use fabric dye for lambskin, human hair dye is considered a better move since the hairs are more similar to human and would hold the color better, as well as less likely to damage the curliness. So I pulled on my gloves that came with the dye kit. Terrible, I know. Mixed up the dye, and got to painting. While I only showed 2 boxes here, I actually had to run back to the store halfway so I could get 2 more boxes. Isn't it so satisfying just watching all the green slowly disappear? This part was pretty fun and the color was a great match. It ended up giving the hair a mottled black-brown look that I ended up actually loving and I think contributed to the Palomino look of the coat. What wasn't fun though was rinsing it. It took an excessive amount of time and felt like the water was never going to run clear. Every time it seemed to start to run clear, as soon as I would kind of squish the lambskin, I would get some more brown hair dye coming out. This would have definitely worked better if I had stronger water pressure, but alas. In the end, I took off my pants just so I could stand in the tub rather than trying to stand on the edges and hover over it because that was literally breaking my back, but I did rinse it until the water ran clear. Then I hung it to dry, and once it was about 90 to 95% dry, it was time to give her a pampering. If I had a proper studio, I would simply clamp a wood panel like plywood or something to the top of my table. This is something I learned when I was apprenticing at the fur atelier, and it's a really cool process, but unfortunately, this is my table and I use it for everything else and it's too small, so I have to do a bit of a janky at-home method. First, I laid the pelt hair side down. Then, I pulled out a rough sponge, leather cleaner and conditioner, and a spray bottle. I diluted some of the cleaner in the water and started misting it all over the suede. Once it was evenly covered, I began methodically rubbing with the sponge to recover the suede's nap. The nap is that fuzzy texture of suede, and on this pelt, it was very stiff and almost crunchy. The conditioner serves to soften the suede, and then the sponge basically dislodges the nap to bring back that soft texture. You can also use a horsehair brush for this, but I already had the sponge, so I used that. You can even see as I do it how the texture of the hide changes.
Now, like I said, normally after this, I would pull it taut and tack it down. Unfortunately though, I didn't have the space, so I opted just to try weighing it down with some fabric weights and tacking it to my cutting board in particular troublesome spots. While that was cooking, I sat down to sketch out some ideas and plan out the pattern. Since I was limited on materials, I knew it would have to be a short jacket. I dropped all my inspirations into a document and then made little mock-ups of my materials with their corresponding measurements before testing out some different design ideas. After settling down on this idea, I grabbed a block pattern from online and modified it for the look I was going for. I spliced it up into pieces that would need to come from each pelt and distributed them on my mock pelts to ensure I had enough material. Now, I guess there's no time like the present, eh? I procrastinated just a little more by giving the nap another brush out on the now dry pelt, then got my computer out, swallowed my trepidation, and started tracing the pattern. I also think this is a good moment to mention the ethics of fur. I did a full deep dive on my thoughts on fur in the Ushanka video, but in summary, I only use recycled, thrifted, and damaged pelts that I basically collect from thrift stores and liquidation centers and stockpile until I have enough to do a project out of them. Alright, now that I got the pattern cut out and pinned together, I decided to try it on to evaluate the fit and fine-tune before moving on to the lambskins. The back and front panels needed some long darts to add more shape, but honestly I probably could have left the shape a bit more simple and boxy since the fluff of the lambskin does hide a lot of the tailoring, but alas, hindsight is 2020.
So I decided to remove the collar. I decided to go without the collar because I kind of really like the way this shape turned out for it to be closed like this. I feel like it goes really well with the big shoulders, and I think the tailoring here, the silhouette that I was looking to get, and when you're working with fur, like you need room to move, but I think it's a pretty fun one.
Well, you do need room to move. Room requires material, something I was sorely lacking in. So I started by first cutting the pattern back into its pieces and marking notches of where the panels were supposed to meet. Then with my mocked up layout of different colors, I started tracing out which pieces would be in which lambskin and marked them with colored pencils in order to keep myself on track. Upon reflection, it would have been a good idea to trace the pattern on another set of pattern paper to have it as backup for future iterations of this coat, as well as the lining, so that I wouldn't have to puzzle all these pieces back together. But once again, alas. After tracing out all the pieces, it was finally time to cut our precious lambskin. No room for mistakes here, so I was being extraordinarily careful, which, if you know me, is a bit out of character. I like to be very organic and throw things together and do a lot of draping, but in this case, when it comes to thrifted leather and pelts, you really don't have room for error, so I was trying my best. In fact, when I took a look at the brown lambskin, I realized the seams holding the square panels together were really messy and visible, and didn't even follow the hair's natural grain. So I added even more to my hand sewing workload by seam ripping the panels to be better unified into usable panels.
So basically at this point, I have separated all these pieces because the seams were overlapping each other and I was losing about an inch of fabric. I see after having done that part of the reason it was done is because there's some little holes. So I will probably have to deal with those. But first and foremost, I'm gonna basically loosely sew them together so that I can cut my shape. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have enough, and I'm just gonna have to piece everything together. So let's hope for the best.
And with that, I started my hand sewing adventure. It truly is such a pleasure finally getting to this part after months of planning and over a year of stockpiling lambskins. A bit rough to be starting with just replacing those panels, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And maybe good for me to warm up before I get started on the serious sewing. I'm using a heavy nylon thread for most of the sewing in order to make sure that the thread is not a point of weakness in the construction, and using a combination of blanket stitching and double back stitches. Ta-da! Look at how clean that connection looks. But unfortunately, we do have a whole nother panel before we even have one piece of the pattern. So, petit sewing montage time. With the panels assembled, I traced my first piece and made the first cut. Using some of the scraps to fill in the gaps, the next 2 hours were spent watching Drag Race and sewing all of the brown lambskin pieces together before moving on to Harley Quinn and the white lambskin. Since I didn't have to piece small panels together for the white, I was able to just cut the entire pattern out and then switch to the dark brown one. After cutting the pattern out in that one, it was time for the bulk of the hand sewing. I was doing blanket stitches about 3 to 4 millimeters apart, which, let me tell you, makes this take forever. And during the process, I learned why leather workers tend to use a vise for hand sewing so that you don't have to grip the panels together. Because let me tell you, it made the padding at the base of my pointer finger ache so bad and literally swell up that I had to whip out the no-name Icy Hot to relieve my poor hands. Lesson learned, I bought a vise for future projects, so that I don't have to deal with this again. When I tell you this whole part of my hand was just aching from pinching the lambskin together just so that I could hold it tight enough so that none of the hairs would come out and get in the way of the sewing.
4 hours later.
I had the sleeves and vest assembled separately. It was time to assess the fit. And can you tell that I'm hating it?
Not sure how I feel about the white at the cuff. So I might replace it with some more of the dark brown or the light brown or a different white lambskin because, yeah, I'm just feeling like it's a little much, but I thought I would like it, but I'm not really feeling it. I feel like this is a little more pared back, lol. And I much prefer how the other sleeve includes the white, like in a more subtle way and less of a intense difference. I'm gonna start with using basically all the scraps to make little contrast patches because some of these have little holes in them that I need to repair anyways. And since I want to have that dappled effect, I feel like if there's like a little darker spotted pieces poking out and little whiter pieces poking out in the brown ones, it might smooth that transition. So before I mess with the cuff, I'm gonna do that.
After driving myself crazy with 2 days of working on filling the holes and adding contrast patches, I switched my attention back to the sleeve. I removed the white cuff panel and switched it out for a combined patchwork of the black and brown scraps. After another full evening of sewing for me, but just a second for you, I closed up the sleeve and tried on my new sleeve vest combo.
Hello, it is once again 2 a.m. and I can't stop sewing, so I figured now that I finished putting together the sleeves and the vest as 2 separate pieces, let me just show you how they're looking. So this is the vest portion. I'm gonna put like a buckle here, that's the plan. At least sleeve number 1 and sleeve number 2. Not quite sure how I'm feeling about it, to be 100% honest. I did this whole little spotting thing that took an obscene amount of time, but I can't say that I was really loving what it was giving. So I decided I was just gonna push forwards and put it together. Sometimes when you're really like not quite feeling something, it's a bit tough to try and see the vision when it's not coming together how you want it to. Sometimes you just have to push on and see the bigger picture and see like if it comes together. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I've been wanting to make a coat for so long. I was really happy with how the pattern turned out. So I just really want to make it happen, you know? Now it's the next night, so I finished sewing the sleeves on. I just came back from the dentist. I also stopped in at the thrift store on the way home. I found this duvet cover. I don't know if you can see it. It has like a little iridescent to it. I think it's just 100% cotton. I was also so lucky to find this wool blanket. It was literally just $7 and it's wool, and it's gonna be great to bring in some structure into the sleeves because right now they're kind of collapsing, and I might do a little bit of shoulder pads, but I feel like the whole sleeve needs a bit of reinforcing. So this was a great find, and it's honestly quite big. So this is gonna be great for other winter projects. So I'm really happy for that. Now, while I was at the dentist, I did do a poll on my Instagram to see what my friends, what the people thought. Okay, so the dilemma is this. This piece is way too dense and long. I'm thinking that I need to trim it to make it kind of also match the shorter lengths of the other lambskins, because right now it just seems like very mismatched. Basically, I was considering either this sort of like boxy crop cut kind of style that I saw in this tulle jacket dress thing that I really liked, or I was thinking to just make it shorter and give it more shape but try to keep it looking natural. Let's see what the poll says. Oh wow, so we have exactly split on the boxy or natural trim style. I guess it's up to me then. So I think because boxy was winning at the beginning, then natural was winning for a bit. So I'm thinking I'm gonna start with boxy but not go too short, just so I can see how it's looking. Then once I'm kind of okay with how that's fitting overall, like the shape is looking, try it on, do another poll, and see if I should blend those choppy cuts and try to make it look a little more natural. So let's get to it.
I started trimming with scissors because I wanted to collect as much of the trimmed lamb's wool as possible to try felting it in the future, and if I used a trimmer, it would end up flying everywhere.
I'm in this kind of dilemma in a fit of I just want to be done this already. I did cut the front of the coat significantly because I really liked how the brown side looked and I wanted it to be visible. We're about to see how that's gonna look. I do think I made the right choice to trim off this section here so that there's more visibility of this side, because I really like how this side looks. I would have loved to make it symmetrical, same as this on the other side, but I don't have more of this lambskin, so I just had to go with what I have. I think this choppy trimming is cool. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I just want to be done this project. Like, I've been working on it for so long. Like, okay, it's not that long. It's only been like a week, but like constantly for a week. but I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna see what comes out of it. It is looking better already than last time I was feeling a bit in crisis, so I think that's a good thing, at least. Let me show you the buckles I'm gonna use. I had a coat that I dyed and cropped, and when I cropped it, I took off the bottom little latch buckle that was like that. So basically, since they are bolted on, I won't be able to undo that, but since there is a bunch of lambskin, and I think I'll be able to hide it in the fur if I just trim the denim off just enough to be able to sew around it, to sew it in. The idea would be, and they just buckle like that. So that's the plan. We'll see. We shall see.
Once I got it more or less trimmed, I changed gears and started working on the wool liner. Sometimes I find it helps so much to take a quick pause from the thing that's breaking your brain so that you can come back with fresh eyes. After cutting the pattern, I used a spray adhesive to set the back panel in place and prevent it from moving around. And then, to keep in theme, I decided to hand sew the liner as well, cause why not? I also did another Instagram poll on the placement of the buckle because I was also considering an option of placing the buckle lower down. In this case, the audience was not split. There was a resounding high placement. I often do polls like this if I'm split between options, so if you want to contribute to that, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Maya Ginsberg. After sewing in the fireman buckles, it was finally time to tackle the lining. This lovely duvet cover is already a double layer, so I laid down my reassembled pattern and got to cutting. With all the pieces cut out, they needed a quick ironing since I won't be able to iron them once they're installed in the coat. Now, time for the only machine sewing portion of the video, assembling the lining. Then I made a quick pouch pocket to put on the inside chest. At this point in my life, I was in the middle of rearranging my apartment, rebuilding my bed, as well as working my job during the day, so a mistake was bound to happen. And when I went to put in the lining into the jacket, disaster struck. This is the exact moment I realized I had reversed the left and right chest panels. I started by seam ripping out my mistakes, and it was pretty bad because I had to basically take off the sleeve as well in order to flip it. So now enjoy an angry montage of me re-sewing the lining. With that done, it was time to turn it back inside out and see if I had fixed my mistake. Hallelujah! Gorgeous. At least I can sleep easy tonight knowing that was finally done. Just kidding, time to hand sew that in. I finished the edges by tucking the raw edge of the lining in, folding it twice so that it's secured inside, and then rolling up the edge of the lambskin and securing that over the lining. Then I use a felling stitch all the way around to finish that edge. Not to mention that before doing that, I actually worked an invisible half back stitch through the wool liner to secure it to the lambskin as well. You might notice that the lining kind of folds down and it has a bit of room. This is actually a jump pleat so that when I move my arms around, the lining isn't tight on the inside of the coat and doesn't get ripped out every time I do a little bit more movement. With that all done, it's time to add the tag. Finally, I added a vintage fur coat buckle to the inside and added it to the bottom of the coat in order to secure the jacket shut for windier weather. And with that,
My hellish week of hand sewing is at an end. I ended up going back and trimming the white lambskin down a bit more to blend the edges, and I decided I liked the natural look better, so I used the trimmer to smooth the transition a bit more. I'm obsessed with the final result. It's a bit unconventional, but it definitely evokes a Palomino horse crossed with a cowboy football player, I think. So I think that's a success. I guess it goes to show that sometimes you have to trust the process and give it a bit of time, and you might end up loving how it turns out. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and follow me on Instagram to contribute to my other projects. And make sure to check out the podcast, which is kind of like fashion, history, pop culture, philosophy themed video essays on YouTube and podcast on Spotify. Bye!